Jack Harper's breath caught in his throat as he lunged, the kitchen knife flashing in the dim cabin light. The woman in the doorway, her pistol steady and her eyes colder than the Alaskan storm outside, didn't flinch. Time seemed to slow, the air thick with the weight of his decision. He wasn't a fighter, not like these people he trained, ruthless, professional. He was just a dad, driven by the primal need to protect his daughter, Lily, and now Evelyn Voss, the billionaire who'd crashed into his life with secrets that could get them all killed. The man holding Evelyn reacted first, shoving her to the floor and raising his gun toward Jack. But Jack was already moving, his body fueled by adrenaline and desperation. He tackled the man, the knife slicing through the air, catching the man's arm. Blood sprayed, hot and slick, and the gun clattered to the floor. Evelyn scrambled for it, her broken arm useless but her good hand clawing at the weapon. The second man, recovering from Jack's earlier blow, charged at him, but Jack rolled, grabbing a chair and swinging it with all his strength. The wood splintered against the man's shoulder, sending him staggering. Enough! The woman in the doorway snapped, her voice like a whip. She fired a shot into the ceiling, the crack deafening in the small space. Plaster dust rained down, and Jack froze, his chest heaving, the knife still in his hand. Evelyn clutched the gun she'd retrieved, but her hand trembled, her injuries sapping her strength. The woman stepped forward, her pistol trained on Jack's chest. "You're brave, Mr. Harper," she said, her tone almost admiring. "But bravery won't save you, or your daughter." Jack's eyes flicked to Lily's locked bedroom door, his heart pounding. She was safe for now, but he knew these people wouldn't hesitate to hurt her if it got them what they wanted. "You don't need to do this," he said, his voice low, trying to buy time. "Take Voss and go." "I don't know anything about your drive." The woman's smile was thin, predatory. "You're a terrible liar," she said. She nodded to the man Jack had cut, who was clutching his bleeding arm but still upright. "Search the place. Tear it apart if you have to." Then she turned to Evelyn, who was propped against the wall, the gun in her lap but too weak to aim it. "You've caused a lot of trouble, Evelyn. Hand over the drive, and I'll make this quick." Evelyn's eyes met Jack's, a silent plea in them. The USB drive, hidden under the floorboards near the fireplace, held the key to her revolutionary energy projector and the evidence of who wanted her dead. Jack's mind raced. He couldn't let them find it, but he couldn't fight his way out either. Not with Lily in the next room, not with 3 armed intruders and his only weapon a kitchen knife. "Last chance, Harper," the woman said, stepping closer, her gun now inches from his chest. "Where's the drive?" Jack's grip tightened on the knife, his muscles coiled. He didn't have a plan, only instinct. "Go to hell," he growled, and threw the knife not at her, but at the lamp on the table. The blade shattered the bulb, plunging the room into darkness, save for the faint glow of the dying fire. Chaos erupted. The woman fired, the muzzle flash blinding, but Jack was already moving, diving behind the couch. Evelyn fired the gun she'd grabbed, the shot wild but enough to make the injured man duck. Jack crawled toward the fireplace, his hands fumbling for the loose floorboard. He pried it up, his fingers brushing the cold metal of the USB drive. He pocketed it, then grabbed the fire poker, its weight solid in his hand. The woman's voice cut through the dark, calm despite the chaos. "You're only delaying the inevitable, Harper. We'll find it, and we'll find your daughter." The words were a knife to his gut, but they also lit a fire in him. He wasn't going to let these people win. He crept along the wall, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. The injured man was near the kitchen, tearing through drawers, while the second man was by the window, his silhouette visible against the faint morning light. The woman was near Evelyn, her gun trained on the billionaire, who was slumped against the wall, barely conscious. Jack had one shot. He lunged at the second man, the poker swinging in a brutal arc. It caught the man's temple with a sickening crack, and he crumpled without a sound. The injured man spun, raising his gun, but Jack was already on him, tackling him to the floor. They grappled, the man's blood making his grip slippery. Jack drove his fist into the man's face, again and again, until he went limp. "Stop!" the woman shouted, her voice sharp with panic for the first time. Jack looked up, his chest heaving, to see her standing over Evelyn, the pistol pressed to her temple. One more move, and she's dead. Then your daughter's next. Jack froze, the poker still in his hand, blood dripping from his knuckles. The drive burned in his pocket, a weight he couldn't ignore. He could give it up, maybe save Lily, but he knew deep down these people wouldn't leave witnesses. Let them go, he said, his voice ragged. You can have me. Just let my daughter and Voss walk. The woman laughed. A cold, hollow sound. You think you're in a position to bargain? She pressed the gun harder against Evelyn's head, making her wince. The drive, Harper. Now. Jack's eyes darted around the room, searching for anything to turn the tables. The rifle he dropped earlier was too far, and the knife was lost in the dark. Then he saw the propane tank by the stove, its valve slightly ajar from the man's reckless search. It was a long shot, dangerous, but it was all he had. He met Evelyn's gaze, hoping she'd understand. She gave a faint nod, her eyes sharp despite the pain. Okay, Jack said, raising his hands slowly, the poker clattering to the floor. I'll get it. He moved toward the fireplace, keeping his body between the woman and the propane tank. His heart pounded as he knelt, pretending to fumble with the floorboards. It's here, he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. The woman stepped closer, her gun still on Evelyn but her attention on Jack. In one fluid motion, he grabbed a burning log from the fire and hurled it at the propane tank. The flames licked the valve, and a hiss filled the air. The woman's eyes widened, but it was too late. Jack dove for Evelyn, pulling her behind the couch as the tank exploded in a deafening roar. Fire and heat surged through the room, the blast knocking the woman off her feet. Windows shattered, and debris rained down, the cabin groaning under the force. Jack shielded Evelyn, his ears ringing, his skin stinging from the heat. The woman lay motionless near the door, her gun lost in the wreckage. The two men were gone, either dead or buried under the rubble. The cabin was a ruin, flames licking at the walls, but Lily's room was on the far side, untouched by the blast. Jack staggered to his feet, coughing through the smoke. Lily! He shouted, stumbling toward her door. Daddy! Her voice came, small but clear. He kicked the door open, finding her huddled under her bed, her bear clutched tight. He pulled her into his arms, relief flooding him. You're okay, he whispered, holding her close. You're okay. Evelyn coughed behind him, struggling to stand. We need to go, she rasped, her face smudged with soot. More will come. Jack nodded, his mind clearing despite the chaos. He grabbed Lily's coat and inhaler, then helped Evelyn to her feet. The USB drive was still in his pocket, a small victory in the wreckage of his home. They stumbled outside. The cold air a shock after the heat of the fire. The cabin was burning, flames climbing into the grey sky, but the forest was quiet. No sign of more attackers yet. They made their way to Jack's old truck, parked behind the shed. He settled Lily in the back, wrapping her in a blanket, then helped Evelyn into the passenger seat. Anchorage, she said, her voice weak but determined. The safe house. We'll be protected there. Jack started the engine, the truck rumbling to life. What about them? He asked, glancing at the burning cabin. You think they're dead? Evelyn shook her head. The woman at Claire, she's too smart to die that easily. She works for someone powerful, someone who won't stop until they have the drive or I'm dead. Jack gripped the wheel, his knuckles white. Then we keep moving. He glanced at Lily in the rear view mirror, her small face pale but brave. You okay, kiddo? She nodded, clutching her bear. Is the lady gonna be okay? Jack looked at Evelyn, her face set with determination despite her injuries. Yeah, he said. She's tough. The drive to Anchorage was long, the roads slick with melting snow. Jack's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of Evelyn's story. A world-changing energy source, a conspiracy to bury it, and now him and Lily caught in the crossfire. He didn't want this fight, but he was in it now, and he'd do whatever it took to keep his daughter safe. They reached the safe house by dusk, a nondescript building on the edge of the city. Evelyn's contacts were waiting, armed guards, a doctor, a tech team who took the drive and began decrypting its data. Jack stayed close to Lily, his hand on her shoulder as the doctor patched up Evelyn. "What now?" he asked, when she emerged, her arm in a proper sling and her face cleaned of blood. "Now we fight back," Evelyn said, her voice steady. "The data on that drive will expose who's behind this. We'll take it public, make it impossible for them to silence us." "And us?" Jack asked, glancing at Lily, who was coloring with a guard's pen. "What happens to me and my kid?" Evelyn met his gaze, her expression softening. "I meant what I said, Jack. I'll take care of you both. New home, new life, whatever you need. But I need you to stay with me until this is over. You're the only one I trust." Jack didn't answer right away. He looked at Lily, her small hand moving in careful strokes, and thought of the life he wanted for Hero One without fear, without struggle. He didn't trust Evelyn completely, not yet, but he trusted her more than the people hunting them. "All right," he said finally. "But if anything happens to my daughter, you'll answer to me." Evelyn nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "Deal." As night fell, Jack sat by Lily's side, watching her sleep in the safe house's spare room. The drive's data was being uploaded, the truth about the conspiracy spreading to the world. But Jack knew this wasn't the end. Claire, if she was alive, would come for them. And whoever she worked for wouldn't stop until the threat was gone. He tightened his grip on the rifle he'd been given, his eyes on the door. He was just a single dad, but he'd fight like hell to protect his family. And maybe, just maybe, he'd help change the world along the way. In the sterile glow of the hospital lobby, the air hummed with the quiet urgency of lives in transit. Patients shuffled toward check-ins, nurses darted with clipboards, and the faint beep of monitors drifted from distant halls. Amid the controlled chaos, a small girl, no older than 7, stood clutching a tattered stuffed rabbit. Her auburn curls fell in a messy cascade over her shoulders, and her wide hazel eyes scanned the room with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Her sneakers, scuffed and slightly too big, squeaked faintly as she shifted her weight. She wore a faded blue dress, its hem frayed, and a thin sweater that did little to shield her from the lobby's chill. Her name was Leela, though no one in the bustling space knew it yet. Leela's gaze locked onto a man striding through the glass doors. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, his presence commanding despite the simplicity of his movements. His dark hair was neatly combed, though a single strand fell across his forehead, and his sharp blue eyes scanned the lobby with purpose, as if he owned the place. Which, in a way, he did. Ethan Caldwell was the CEO of Caldwell Enterprises, a conglomerate with stakes in hospitals across the state, including this one. He wasn't here for business today, or for just a routine visit to check on an old friend recovering from surgery. Yet something about the weight of the girl's stare stopped him mid-step. "Sir," Leela's voice was barely a whisper, trembling as she stepped closer, her rabbit dangling from one hand. "Are you mine, you daddy?" Ethan froze. The question hit like a rogue wave, unexpected and disorienting. He glanced around, half expecting a parent or guardian to swoop in, but no one came. The lobby carried on phones ringing, a janitor mopping in the corner, a couple arguing softly by the vending machines. Leela stood there, her small frame rigid with expectation, her eyes searching his face for an answer he didn't have. "Yeah, what?" Ethan managed, crouching slightly to meet her at eye level. His voice, usually steady in boardrooms, faltered. He wasn't used to children, let alone ones asking questions that felt like they belonged in a novel. "Sweetheart, I think you've got the wrong person." Leela's lips quivered, but she didn't back down. "Mama said my new daddy would come for me. She said he'd be tall and important, and you look important." Her voice was soft but insistent, like she'd rehearsed this moment in her head 1,000 times. Ethan's brow furrowed. He glanced at the receptionist, who was too busy typing to notice, then back at Leela. "Where's your mum?" he asked gently, his tone softening despite the confusion swirling in his mind. "She's upstairs," Leela said, pointing vaguely toward the elevators. "She's sick. Real sick. She said I'd know my new daddy when I saw him." Ethan's chest tightened. He wasn't equipped for these, are not the emotional weight of a child's hope, nor the mystery of her words. He straightened, scanning the lobby again, as if answers might materialize from the fluorescent haze. "Okay, let's find someone who can help," he said, gesturing toward the reception desk. But Leela grabbed his sleeve, her tiny fingers surprisingly firm. "Please don't go," she whispered. "I've been waiting forever." The words landed like a punch. Ethan, who'd built a fortune on decisive action, felt paralyzed. He didn't know how to navigate these, and not the girl, not the situation, not the strange ache her plea stirred in him. He knelt again, his polished shoes scuffing against the linoleum. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, surprising himself with the promise. "But we need to figure this out." "What's your name?" "Leela," she said, clutching her rabbit tighter. "Leela Marie Thompson." "Okay, Leela Marie Thompson," Ethan said, forcing a small smile. "Let's go talk to someone who can help us find your mom." She nodded, her grip on his sleeve loosening but not letting go entirely. As they walked toward the reception desk, Ethan's mind raced. Who was this girl? Why did she think he was her father? And what did she mean by new daddy? He'd never been married, never had kids. His life was a carefully curated series of acquisitions, meetings, and calculated risks. This was uncharted territory. The receptionist, a woman with a tight bun and a name tag reading Clara, looked up as they approached. "Can I help you?" she asked, her eyes flicking between Ethan's tailored suit and Leela's disheveled appearance. "This is Leela," Ethan said, resting a hand lightly on the girl's shoulder. "She's looking for her mom, who's a patient here." "Can you check for a Thompson?" Clara's fingers flew over the keyboard, her expression neutral but practiced. "Thompson, a broken bar. I've got a Sarah Thompson in room 412. Eku. Admitted 3 days ago." She paused, glancing at Leela. "Are you family?" Ethan hesitated. "I'm a broken bar helping Leela," he said, sidestepping the question. "Can we see her?" Clara's eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded. "Immediate family only in the Eku. I'll need to verify with the staff." "Can you wait a moment?" Ethan nodded, guiding Leela to a nearby chair. She sat, her legs swinging slightly, the rabbit now pressed against her chest. "Is Mama okay?" she asked, her voice small again. "I'm sure the doctors are taking good care of her," Ethan said, though he had no idea if it was true. He wasn't used to reassuring anyone, let alone a child. His world was one of contracts and bottom lines, not hospital lobbies and frightened little girls. Yet here he was, tethered to this moment by a pair of hazel eyes and a question he couldn't shake. As they waited, Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his assistant: "Board meeting rescheduled to 3 p.m. Need your input on the merger." He ignored it. For the first time in years, work felt secondary. He glanced at Leela, who was staring at a faded poster about flu shots, her expression unreadable. What kind of life had led her here, alone in a hospital lobby, mistaking a stranger for her father? Clara returned, her expression softer now. "You can go up to the Eku, but only one visitor at a time for now. The nurses will guide you." Ethan stood, offering Leela his hand. She took it without hesitation, her small palm warm against his. The elevator ride to the 4th floor was silent, save for the soft hum of the machinery. Leela's grip tightened as the doors opened to the Eku, where the air felt heavier, charged with the weight of lives hanging in balance. A nurse met them, her badge reading Nancy, and led them to room 412. Sarah Thompson lay in the bed, surrounded by monitors and tubes. Her face was pale, her auburn hair eerily similar to Lila's displayed across the pillow. She looked young, maybe early 30s, but illness had carved deep lines into her features. Ethan felt a pang of something unfamiliar, a pity, maybe, or something deeper. "Leela, sweetheart," Nancy said, kneeling beside the girl. "Your mom's resting now." "She's been fighting hard." Leela nodded, her eyes fixed on her mother. "Can I stay with her?" "For a little while," Nancy said. "But we need to keep things calm." "Okay." Ethan watched as Leela climbed onto a chair beside the bed, her rabbit tucked under one arm. She reached for her mother's hand, careful not to disturb the four-line. The sight stirred something in Ethan, a memory he couldn't quite place. His own mother, maybe, from a time before his life became boardrooms and balance sheets. Nancy turned to Ethan. "Are you her father?" "No," he said quickly, then softer. "I just met her downstairs." She broke in. Thought I was someone else. Nancy's brow lifted, but she didn't press. "Well, you're here now. That's what matters." Sarah's been in and out of consciousness, but she's stable for the moment. Leela's been here every day since her mom was admitted. "Every day?" Ethan asked, glancing at the girl. "Where's her family?" Nancy hesitated, her voice lowering. "There's no one else. Sarah's a single mom. No relatives listed. Leela's been staying with a social worker when she's not here." Buta broken. "It's complicated." Ethan's jaw tightened. Complicated didn't begin to cover it. He looked at Leela, who was whispering something to her mother, her small voice barely audible over the hum of the machines. He should leave here, call the social worker, let the system handle this. He had a company to run, deals to close. But the memory of Leela's question, "Are you my new daddy?" kept him rooted. "I'll stay until we sort this out," he said, more to himself than to Nancy. She nodded, handing him a clipboard. "Fill this out if you're staying as her temporary guardian for now. Just protocol." Ethan took the clipboard, his pen hovering over the form. Temporary guardian. The words felt foreign, heavy with responsibility he'd never sought. He glanced at Leela again, her small frame curled protectively near her mother. He started writing. Over the next hour, Ethan sat in a stiff hospital chair, watching Leela hum softly to her rabbit while Sarah slept. He learned fragments of their story from Nancy. Sarah's cancer diagnosis, the lack of insurance, the mounting bills. Leela had been shuttled between the hospital and a temporary foster home, her life a patchwork of uncertainty. Yet she carried herself with a quiet resilience that made Ethan's chest ache. His phone buzzed again. Another text, this time about a stock dip. He silenced it. For the first time in years, Ethan Caldwell, the man who controlled empires, felt powerless. And yet, as Leela glanced back at him, offering a shy smile, he felt something else too, a pull towards something he couldn't name. Hours later, as the hospital lights dimmed for the evening, Sarah stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, landing on Leela first, then Ethan. Confusion clouded her gaze. "Whoa, broken. Are you?" she rasped, her voice weak. Ethan leaned forward, unsure how to answer. "I'm Ethan," he said simply. "I'm here with Leela." Sarah's eyes softened, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "She's a broken special, isn't she?" "Yeah," Ethan said, his voice catching. "She is." As Sarah's eyes closed again, Leela climbed into Ethan's lap, her rabbit pressed between them. "You're staying, right?" she whispered. Ethan didn't answer right away. He didn't know how to explain that he wasn't her father, that he wasn't built for this. But as her small hand curled into his, he nodded. "I'm staying," he said, and for the first time, he meant it. 3 weeks later, the hospital lobby looked different to Ethan. The sterile glow felt less cold, the bustle less distant. He'd spent every day since that first encounter shuttling between his office and the hospital, balancing boardroom crises with Leela's quiet questions. Sarah's condition had worsened, and the doctors were blunt. Time was running out. Ethan had paid off her medical bills anonymously, a decision that surprised even himself. It wasn't charity, it was necessity. Leela deserved a chance to say goodbye. Today, he sat with Leela in the hospital's small garden, a patch of green tucked behind the ICU. She was drawing on a sketch pad he'd bought her, her crayons scratching out a picture of a house with 3 stick figures. "That's Mama, me, and you," she said, pointing proudly. Ethan's throat tightened. He hadn't corrected her about the daddy thing since that first day, not because he believed it, but because he couldn't bear to dim the hope in her eyes. "It's beautiful," he said, ruffling her hair. Sarah passed that night, quietly, with Leela curled beside her. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching as the nurses worked, their movements gentle but final. When Leela realized her mother was gone, her sobs were silent, her small body shaking against Ethan's chest. He held her, awkward at first, then fiercely, as if he could shield her from the world's cruelty. The social worker arrived the next morning, a kind woman named Miss Rivera, who explained the foster care process. Ethan listened, his mind racing. Leela clung to his hand, her rabbit now a permanent fixture in her arms. "Can I stay with you?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Ethan looked at Miss Rivera, then at Leela. He thought of his penthouse, his endless meetings, his life built on control. Then he thought of Leela's smile, her quiet strength, the way she'd claimed him in that lobby. He wasn't her father and not by blood. But maybe, just maybe, he could be something else. "I'd like to explore that," he told Miss Rivera, his voice steady now. "Whatever it takes." Leela's arms wrapped around his waist, and for the first time in years, Ethan Caldwell felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. In the sterile glow of the hospital lobby, the air thrummed with the quiet urgency of lives in flux. Patients shuffled toward check-ins, nurses darted with clipboards, and the faint beep of monitors drifted from distant halls. Amid this controlled chaos, a small girl, no older than 7, stood clutching a tattered stuffed rabbit. Her auburn curls fell messily over her shoulders, and her wide hazel eyes scanned the room with a mix of help and trepidation. Her sneakers, scuffed and slightly too big, squeaked faintly as she shifted her weight. She wore a faded blue dress, its hem frayed, and a thin sweater that did little to shield her from the lobby's chill. Her name was Leela, though no one in the bustling space knew it yet. Leela's gaze locked onto a man striding through the glass doors. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, his presence commanding despite the simplicity of his movements. His dark hair was neatly combed, though a single strand fell across his forehead, and his sharp blue eyes scanned the lobby with purpose, as if he owned the place. Which, in a way, he did. Ethan Caldwell was the CEO of Caldwell Enterprises, a conglomerate with stakes in hospitals across the state, including this one. "He wasn't here for business today. Just a routine visit to check on an old friend recovering from surgery." Yet something about the weight of the girl's stare stopped him mid-step. "Sir," Leela's voice was barely a whisper, trembling as she stepped closer, her rabbit dangling from one hand. "Are you mine, you daddy?" Ethan froze. The question hit like a rogue wave, unexpected and disorienting. He glanced around, half expecting a parent or guardian to swoop in, but no one came. The lobby carried on phones ringing, a janitor mopping in the corner, a couple arguing softly by the vending machines. Leela stood there, her small frame rigid with expectation, her eyes searching his face for an answer he didn't have. "Yeah, what?" Ethan managed, crouching slightly to meet her at eye level. His voice, usually steady in boardrooms, faltered. He wasn't used to children, let alone ones asking questions that felt like they belonged in a novel. "Sweetheart, I think you've got the wrong person." Leela's lips quivered, but she didn't back down. "Mama said my new daddy would come for me. She said he'd be tall and important, and you look important." Her voice was soft but insistent, like she'd rehearsed this moment in her head 1,000 times. Ethan's brow furrowed. He glanced at the receptionist, who was too busy typing to notice, then back at Leela. "Where's your mum?" he asked gently, his tone softening despite the confusion swirling in his mind. "She's upstairs," Leela said, pointing vaguely toward the elevators. "She's sick. Real sick. She said I'd know mine you daddy when I saw him." Ethan's chest tightened. He wasn't equipped for these, not the emotional weight of a child's hope, nor the mystery of her words. He straightened, scanning the lobby again, as if answers might materialize from the fluorescent haze. "Okay, let's find someone who can help," he said, gesturing toward the reception desk. But Leela grabbed his sleeve, her tiny fingers surprisingly firm. "Please don't go," she whispered. "I've been waiting forever." The words landed like a punch. Ethan, who'd built a fortune on decisive action, felt paralyzed. He knelt again, his polished shoes scuffing against the linoleum. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, surprising himself with the promise. "But we need to figure this out." "What's your name?" "Leela," she said, clutching her rabbit tighter. "Leela Marie Thompson." "Okay, Leela Marie Thompson," Ethan said, forcing a small smile. "Let's go talk to someone who can help us find your mom." She nodded, her grip on his sleeve loosening but not letting go entirely. As they walked toward the reception desk, Ethan's mind raced. Who was this girl? Why did she think he was her father? And what did she mean by